Hey guys, subscribe for daily content, and if you're shopping for gear, make sure you check out the description for the newest items at some of the very best online retailers. There's also links for some of the items that I personally recommend. Thanks! What's going on YouTube? Metal Complex here, and today I've got another interesting knife review slash knife overview to share with you guys. This is the WE Knives Skreech. This is a newer model from WE Knives, and it was sent to me by WE Knives, so thank you very much for sending this in. I really appreciate that. As per usual, it will not affect my ability to do a full and honest review on this knife. You can pick this knife up. I will link it down below along with WE Knives in general so you can check out what else they've got going on. Thanks so much to my generous patrons for supporting me. There's a link for Patreon right down below. And please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. Let's go ahead and get a measurement of this guy. So the overall length of the Skreech, which is, by the way, a butch ball design. I'm not familiar with that, the designer, but I just wanted to make sure that you guys knew. Overall length is coming in at 7.5 inches. The blade length is coming in at, you could call it 3.4. If you measure up here, it's like 3.25. The cutting edge is coming in at just a hair over 3 inches. So in some areas, this is going to be illegal. Definitely pay attention to that. Let's do some size comparisons up against the Ontario Rat Model 1 and the Ontario Rat Model 2. It's definitely closer to the Rat 2, but it's just a taller, thicker knife, right? How about up against the Spyderco PM2 and the Spyderco Para 3? Closer to the size of the Para 3, definitely. In fact, you know, it's only a 1/4 inch difference. It's definitely got more cutting edge, though. Nowhere near the same length as the PM2. And last but not least, let's put it up against the Benchmade Griptilian, or in this case, the Ritter Hogue, and the Mini Griptilian. I'd say it's, well, it's right in between these two knives, absolutely. It still feels like a full-size knife, though. 7.5 inches, but this is kind of a thicker, chunkier knife a little bit, so it still has that full knife feeling to it. Let's go ahead and do a hardware check, get out my tools. Tools are very recommendable, absolutely, and definitely not expensive. The pivot, I believe the pivot and all of the body hardware is going to be T8. Let's go ahead and check that here real quick. T8 for the pivots, T8 for the lock bar screw, T8 for the body screws. Yeah, it's all T8. Well, no, wait a second. Yeah, even the pocket, it's all T8. That's great. So yeah, this is going to be easy to disassemble. I'll tell you guys, if it weren't for the screws, it would have thrown me because of the way that they carved out this backspacer. It honestly almost looks like an integral knife. This is just a very well done backspacer, and it's perfectly flush back here. And they've carved it to meet up with each of the sides of the titanium perfectly. So it looks really, really good. You definitely will have to take the body screws out, but it's just 2 on each side. And then the pivot, really simple. It's going to be a captive pivot as far as I know. So this is, I mean, this is exactly what I look for as far as disassembly. It's great. Let's go ahead and do carry profile. Thickness up against the Spyderco Para 3. I called it a thicker knife. It just has that full knife feeling, right? So I didn't necessarily mean thick. It's actually, these pieces up here, you can see how there's like an edge right here. So the full thickness is probably about the same as the Spyderco Para 3. So no big deal there. It's got kind of a flip. It's kind of like, it reminds me of the Hinder Jurassic in the body shape, right? I mean, actually, a lot of this, if you go look at the Hinder Jurassic, there's some similarities in the lines. So it's carved out right here, and while the flipper tab looks super prominent, it is really only sticking up past the maximum height of the back end of the frame just a little bit, so it doesn't make it as prominent as it looks. Height and length up against the PM2 and Para 3. You can see here that the body length is about almost exactly the same as the Para 3. Height, it's still being cleared a little bit, just ever so slightly, by the PM2 and Para 3, which are the same height at maximum. So there you go. Not anything crazy, right? It is titanium, and I believe it is full. I believe it's solid. Let's take a look if we can see. So I can see it in my line. I don't know if you guys can see it in yours. It just doesn't really want to, yeah, there's no milling on the inside of this for whatever reason. It kind of surprises me. I don't know why. I mean, that's fine. I don't mind a full thickness knife. It's just weird that they didn't mill it out, but they didn't. So whatever. Let's go ahead and weigh it. I'm going to guess this knife weighs between 4.5 and 5. I'm going to say it's 5 ounces. Okay, less than that, 4.62 ounces. It's definitely over the mark if you go by the ratios, right? The, you know, ounce and inch thing with the blade. But it's right in my ballpark of size and weight. It's on the lower end for weight that I prefer to carry. It just doesn't bother me that much. So do with that information what you will. Probably not a knife for athletic shorts, but if that's your thing, then go right ahead, right? Because it would be your money that you're spending on it. Let's go ahead and measure blade stock thickness. I'm going to guess that that's 145 thousandths. Nope, it's 155 thousandths. So it's kind of thick on the spine. Not crazy, but it's definitely, we're in ZTO 562 territory with thickness. So there you go. This comes in two different configurations that I've seen. This really cool kind of vintage bronze and black look where they knock down these corners and then they anodize them. I like how that looks. I like bronze and black. It looks really good. If you're not into this, they have a full monochromatic, just sort of, you know, I don't know if it's like heavily tumbled tie and then the tumbled blade. This is the bronze and black with the bronze anodized hardware. And actually, it might not be titanium hardware. Yeah, the hardware appears to be steel. It's just heat treated, I guess, or at least that's my magnet's telling me that. And then we've got a satin finish blade. I got to be honest with you. I mean, I've been saying this a lot. I'm sick of the satin finish. This is the same satin finish that you see on a much less expensive knife. And truthfully, my preferred finish, which is tumbled, is also a finish that you see on much less expensive knives. I don't know why, I just really am bored of satin, but that's an aesthetic thing. It's not a nitpick. I'm not saying this knife should be less money because I don't really like the finish. No, that's just my thing. But it's nice because you can get a version of this with a different finish on it. The blade looks good. It's well done. We have a recurve, which is not my favorite thing in the entire world. I wish that it wasn't a recurve, but for those of you who are not, you know, that don't find, I don't like sharpening in them and I don't like how they look, but it does allow you to pull material into the main belly of the blade. And so in some cutting situations, it offers a benefit there, right? And if you don't mind it aesthetically, then, you know, yeah, then you could view that as full benefit. What's the blade steel? It's 20 CV, which is fantastic. That's an analog to M390. I don't have a problem with that. There's a flat that carries out about 80% the length of the blade. Carries some meaningful thickness out to the tip and drops to a reasonable edge. It's not mega thin. In fact, some people might call that a little bit thick, but the edge itself is sharpened really well. I don't have an issue with that. It's definitely going to get through your general EDC tasks. It's just not going to laser through stuff like an Opinel or anything. On the other side, you can see there, it has the Butch Ball logo. So it says Ball Knives Custom. It's definitely not a custom knife, but I imagine he does do his own custom knives. So there you go. That's the designer. Yeah, all the corners are nicely knocked down. The spine of the blade looks good. So the only sharp part is the edge, and the edge is done well. I don't have an issue with the blade other than the fact that it's a recurve. As per usual, I don't mind the WE logo right there. I like that they keep pretty much everything off the blade except for the designer's mark, so that's cool. Hardware placement looks good. The backspacer is really cool. That's really neat how they did that. They carved it out, like I said, to meet each side of the titanium frame. And then we've got the edges of the backspacer are also anodized just like the corners of the knife, which, by the way, are nicely knocked down. There's no like mega sharpness or anything like that. It's just kind of a blocky knife. This looks really good back here. I really like this. It might be my favorite part of the knife. Ergonomically, the primary position that you're meant to hold onto it in is comfortable enough, right? It's kind of blocky, right? I'm not saying it's angular or sharp. It's just kind of a blocky feeling knife. And you are kind of, you're not forced into these spots, but it's a heavy suggestion on a, you know, the handle length here, as far as my hands go, we're an XL glove, which means I've got a fairly average sized hand. You're kind of trapped into one spot. The one spot that you're trapped into is comfortable and you can definitely lock in. Your finger's kind of being pushed up against this flipper tab that's got a little bit of jimping on it, but it's not aggressive. The flipper tab itself is definitely not aggressive. So you're just kind of trapped into an area on a knife that feels kind of blocky. The pocket clip is flat, so it's not that big of a deal, right? It's just not the most masterful ergonomic work I've ever experienced. Flipping action on this is great on the break. It's got a nice snap to it too. I'll let you listen again. Yeah, sounds good. You can light switch it. You can also, because of the angle of the flipper tab, you can push button. It feels good. Disengagement, we've got a relief cut that's not offering a lot of relief. And then we also have a titanium frame lock that has not been, I like it when they sort of carve it out or scallop it out because it's a little easier on the fingers. This has just been knocked down on either side. And I appreciate that, right? I mean, that's nice. You can still get your finger in there. It just takes quite a bit of force to disengage it. And because that relief cut there's a lot of lock bar tension. That coupled with the fact that these edges here at a 90-degree angle, right, it just kind of makes it a little bit cumbersome to disengage. On top of that, the action itself is tight. I tried loosening up the pivot and the blade went off center. Now, I can loosen up the, if you guys have never seen that video about how I talk about centering a blade, it's really easy to recenter a blade and adjust it for action, especially one that's just got a few body screws and it's a titanium frame lock. I could definitely pull these body screws out a little bit, pull the pivot out, do the trick with a piece of paper, probably get the action exactly the way that I want it and still have it centering up and locking up solid. But as this came, it was a little bit tight. I'm sure it'll loosen up a little bit over time. You're seeing there, I'm just taking a few extra shakes. There's no lumpiness or grittiness in here. It honestly just feels a little bit tight, but that's okay. The action is good, and you can definitely easily disengage it with no double clutch or anything like that. I'm just reporting on what I'm feeling here. The pocket clip is fine. It goes along with the knife, right? You kind of have this neat sort of modern look to it. It definitely is a titanium clip. What I don't like is this area right here. Clips like this that sort of come up and curve over almost always ends up being something that my pocket doesn't agree with, the pocket seam. All it involves is me using two hands to sort of push the knife and hold the seam, you know, instead of just taking one. And you can do that, but if the pocket seam is thicker than this, between the surface of the titanium frame and the bill of the clip, then you're going to have to use two hands. When it's a continuous ramp like this, well, like this, you can just push it in with one hand. It'll rise to meet that seam almost every single time. So that's a mild annoyance. It's not really that big of a deal. This knife doesn't carry shallow, but it also doesn't carry deep. A little bit sticking up out of your pocket. I really don't think that that's big of a deal. You do have a steel lock bar insert that doubles as the over travel stop, so that's great. The centering on this blade as it came in. Now I've been flipping it over and over and over again, and I'm almost certain, because I did back that out to try it. So we'll go ahead and tighten that back up and make sure that that blade comes back to center. Let's try that here real quick. Are we centered up? Yeah, we're centered up. So there you go. It's fine. Centering is fine. Lockup is fine. There is a internal stop pin that rides with the blade. So that's fine. That means it's bracing on both sides of the titanium internally. I don't have a problem with that at all. In fact, I prefer it. No lock, no lock stick is what I was going to say. And then it is absolutely solid. Up, down, left, or right. And the detent is plenty strong. Yeah, plenty strong on the detent. Nitpicks, you're kind of confined. It's a little bit blocky. I don't like recurves. Not a big fan of the satin finish. Those two things there are just kind of personal nitpicks, right? Pocket clip ramp is meh, right? The overall aesthetic, I mean, I'm more attracted to the colors on this particular one than I am the lines all the way around. Is it functional? Yes. Is it a good value? I think so. They want $225 for it. This is pretty typical. Like, we've got way too many titanium frame lock flippers running on bearings in CPM 20 CV. This is kind of right in line with all that. It's not really offering anything special outside of the incredible amount of competition that this thing is facing. But if you like how this looks, the knife itself is a recommendable knife. It's got a couple of quirks, right? But it's good enough and it'll function for EDC. I think anybody who picks this up is going to be happy with it. And I think that this does still cater to a large audience, which is why we see so many knives with this build quality in this territory. It is not made in the United States. Do with that information what you will. That being said, again, versus the competition, they're still offering really good value here, or just pretty good value, right? It's not any like, oh my gosh, like if this thing came in at $175, I'd be like, wow. $225 is fine, right? Anywhere from $200 to $225, I probably would have been like, yeah, pretty good, right? Doesn't really wow me. Nothing like spectacular here, which is why we're finishing up here, and we're only at the, we're barely under 14 minutes here. But yeah, it's good enough. I do like, Wii's quality overall. They still do a fantastic job. They still make a great knife. This isn't my favorite design in the entire world, but yeah, it's definitely still recommendable. It's still good enough. The build quality is absolutely there, and I think anybody, like I said, who picks it up is going to be happy with it. I don't really think that this needs to go on any longer. This is really all that I wanted to say. Like I said, you can pick up this knife and the other variant of it right down in the description. You can also check out Wii Knives in general right down there if you want to. Thanks again to Wii Knives for sending this in for review. Please make sure to follow me on Instagram at metal_complex. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like. If you'd like to check out my other content, I do, of course, have lots of videos of knives that are either expensive or inexpensive that I do or don't like, so check those out. And if you enjoy all my content, go ahead and subscribe because there's definitely more coming. Thanks again for watching, everybody, and have a great day.